They expected screams. They expected panic, chaos, desperate pleas for mercy transmitted into the void. What they did not expect was silence. Absolute, terrifying silence. When the Galactic Empire's armada arrived at the edge of the Sol system, it blotted out the stars. Millions of ships, war cruisers, dreadnoughts, carrier hives, slid out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Their hulls shimmered with ancient alloys. Their weapons glowed with stored annihilation. To the rest of the galaxy, this fleet was not just an army. It was a death sentence. Civilizations had fallen at the mere sight of it. Entire species had surrendered before the Empire even fired a shot. History recorded countless worlds that chose obedience rather than extinction. Earth was supposed to be one of them. The Empire's High Admiral, HFY, watched the blue planet rotate beneath his flagship's observation deck. Scans showed dense population centers, artificial satellites, orbital defenses that were primitive, crude even. So, this is humanity, he hissed. Soft. No unified military command. No interstellar allies. No hope. The alien commanders around him agreed. To them, Earth was loud, chaotic, inefficient. Humans argued with one another. They debated instead of obeying. They wasted time on ethics and laws. The Empire saw only weakness. At precisely midnight Galactic Standard Time, the Empire broadcast its ultimatum. The message hijacked every human satellite, every screen, every communication network on Earth. Species designation, human, the cold mechanical voice announced. By decree of the Galactic Empire, your world is hereby claimed. You will surrender all military authority, transfer planetary resources, and accept imperial governance. There was a pause. Failure to comply within 1 hour will result in planetary sterilization. Across Earth, billions of humans heard the same words. Cities froze. Airports stopped. Markets crashed in seconds. Parents pulled children close. Soldiers looked to the sky. Governments rushed into emergency sessions. Religious leaders prayed. Scientists stared at impossible sensor readings, confirming what the message promised was very real. For the first time in human history, Earth was no longer alone, and humanity realized something far worse. They were not being invited. They were being conquered. Alien observers across the galaxy tuned in. Earth had become the most watched world in known space. Analysts predicted a response within minutes. Panic, negotiation, surrender. After all, every species did the same thing when faced with extinction. Every species except one. 10 minutes passed. No reply. 20 minutes. Still nothing. Alien commentators began to mock the silence. They are paralyzed by fear, one analyst said. They are arguing among themselves, another laughed. Soon, they will beg. Inside the Empire's command chamber, Admiral HFY narrowed his eyes. Increase pressure, he ordered. The Empire's fleet adjusted formation. Planet-killer weapons powered up, their energy signatures visible even to human telescopes. A single demonstration shot was fired, vaporizing Earth's moon-sized asteroid defense platform in a blinding flash. It was a warning. Earth still did not respond. What the Empire could not see, what no alien sensor was programmed to understand, was what was happening beneath Earth's surface. Deep underground, far below cities and oceans, hidden behind layers of classified secrecy, humanity's final protocols were awakening. Rooms that had not been opened in decades came alive. Ancient servers hummed. Red warning lights illuminated faces hardened by generations of preparation. This was not panic. This was confirmation. Confirmation that the nightmare scenario humanity had quietly prepared for was finally real. In one secure chamber, a single phrase appeared on screens across the planet's highest military command centers. Total war contingency confirmed. For centuries, humans had feared invasion. They had imagined it in movies, books, and simulations. But unlike other species, humanity never stopped at imagination. They planned. They planned obsessively. They planned in secret. Because human history taught one brutal lesson above all others. If someone comes to erase you, you make sure they never try again. As the 1-hour deadline ticked down, world leaders gathered in a unified emergency council, something humanity had never achieved before. Political rivals stood shoulder to shoulder. Old enemies shared data. Nuclear launch codes, space command access, and Black Project authorizations were synchronized. Not because they wanted war, but because surrender was no longer an option. The Empire believed Earth was silent because it was afraid. In truth, Earth was silent because humanity was making the most dangerous decision in its history: to stop surviving and start fighting. At 59 minutes and 30 seconds, the Empire prepared to fire. Admiral XYR raised a clawed hand. "Record this," he said calmly. "Let the galaxy remember what happens when primitives defy the Empire." Weapons across the fleet charged to full power. Space itself bent under the energy buildup. The planet below shimmered, unaware of how close it was to annihilation. Then, without warning, every Empire sensor screamed. Not alarms. Screams. Dozens of unidentified signals erupted across the Sol system. Human satellites that had seemed harmless suddenly transformed. Civilian vessels altered trajectories with impossible precision. Deep space objects that had been cataloged as debris activated engines that had been dormant for decades. Human technology did not glow like Imperial weapons. It went dark, and that terrified the Empire more than any show of force. "What is happening?" an officer demanded. Before anyone could answer, Earth finally responded. Not with a plea, not with a threat, but with a single transmission broadcast across every Imperial channel, translated instantly into thousands of alien languages. The message was short, cold, human. "This is Earth." A pause. "You gave us 1 hour." Another pause. "We used it." The transmission ended, and the galaxy held its breath. Because in that moment, the Empire realized something it had never faced before. This species did not fear extinction. They had prepared for war their entire lives. And whatever humanity was about to unleash would not stop at Earth's skies. The Empire had fought thousands of wars. They had never seen anything like this. The moment Earth's transmission ended, space around the Sol system changed. Not visually, no explosions yet, no glowing weapons, but behaviorally. Imperial sensors began detecting movement where none should exist. Human satellites shifted formation. Civilian cargo vessels altered course with military precision. Asteroids, cataloged for decades as harmless, began accelerating. Admiral XYR stared at the tactical display, his confidence cracking for the first time. "Explain," he demanded. No one could, because what the Empire was witnessing wasn't a fleet mobilization. It was an ecosystem waking up. Across Earth, total war protocols moved from theory to execution. These were not plans written for victory. They were written for survival at any cost. Human military doctrine had one brutal principle: when extinction is the alternative, restraint is a luxury. Hidden launch facilities opened beneath oceans. Mountains split apart as armored silos rose for the first time in history. Deep space platforms that had never transmitted a signal suddenly came alive, linked into a single planetary war network. Humanity had no emperor, no single commander. Instead, it had something far more dangerous: distributed decision authority. There was no head to cut off, no capital world to destroy. Every command node could fight independently. Every system knew the objective and the threat completely. In the Empire fleet, confusion spread. "Why are their ships not forming defensive lines?" one officer asked. "Why are they spreading out?" Another voice cut in, nervous. "Admiral, they're not defending Earth." XYR eyes widened. "They're hunting us." Before he could issue new orders, the first human strike began. Not with beams, not with missiles, but with silence. Imperial long-range sensors went blind across entire sectors. Communications lagged. Navigation beacons flickered, then vanished. Empire fleets prided themselves on overwhelming firepower, but that firepower relied on centralized coordination. Humanity knew that, and they attacked the brain before the body. From deep space, quantum-entangled signal disruptors activated, Technology humans had never shared, never demonstrated, and never intended to use unless absolutely necessary. Entire Imperial squadrons lost contact with command in seconds. "Restore channels," XYRR Val shouted. "They're gone, Admiral," an officer replied, voice shaking. "Not jammed. Removed." The Empire had prepared for resistance. They had not prepared for isolation. Then the killing began. From behind the moon, human strike craft emerged, small, dark, and fast. They did not glow. They did not broadcast. They didn't even appear hostile until they were already inside Imperial formations. They moved like predators. Each ship targeted something specific: sensor arrays, power relays, command bridges. No wasted shots. No dramatic explosions. Just precision. Empire cruisers began to drift, powerless. Dreadnoughts lost shields and collided with their own escorts. Carrier hives became floating tombs as their launch bays failed mid-deployment. "Return fire," an officer screamed. But the Empire's weapons were designed for intimidation and mass destruction, not close-range chaos. Their targeting systems struggled to lock onto human craft that refused to behave predictably. Human pilots didn't fly in formations. They flew like they were alive. Every move was irregular. Every angle unexpected. AI assistants predicted enemy responses before they happened. Not because humans were smarter, but because they had trained for opponents stronger than themselves their entire history. Back on Earth, humanity escalated. Nuclear weapons were armed, but not for planetary defense. For space warfare. Human warheads detonated inside Imperial shield envelopes, exploiting weaknesses the Empire believed were theoretical. Shockwaves rippled through tightly packed fleets, tearing ships apart without ever touching their hulls. Admiral XYRVAL watched as 3 battle groups vanished from the tactical display. "Impossible," he whispered. "This was not a battle. This was a collapse." And then humanity revealed its true intent. The Empire expected Earth to protect itself. They did not expect Earth to attack everywhere. Humanity had traced Imperial hyperspace routes, communication relays, and logistical hubs long before the fleet arrived. Sleeper probes, sent decades earlier under civilian disguises, activated simultaneously across Imperial territory. Supply depots exploded. Relay stations vanished. Entire Imperial frontier sectors lost contact with the core. The Empire's greatest strength, its vast size, became its greatest weakness. "Admiral," an aide said quietly, "reports indicate uprisings on occupied worlds." XYRRVAL turned slowly. "What?" "Subject species, they're rebelling. They've seen the Empire bleed. Because humanity didn't just fight with weapons. They fought with example. Across the galaxy, enslaved civilizations watched as the so-called invincible Empire struggled against a single planet. Hope spread faster than fear ever had. Back in Seoul, the Empire tried to regroup. Dreadnought cannons finally fired. Planet killer beams aimed at Earth itself. But before they could reach the planet, human countermeasures activated. Earth's magnetic field spiked unnaturally. Artificial gravity distortions bent incoming energy weapons off course. Orbital defense platforms, dismissed as primitive, unleashed railgun salvos at relativistic speeds. Entire beams missed. Entire dreadnoughts didn't. The Empire lost 5 capital ships in under 30 seconds. Silence filled the command chamber. XYRRVAL understood the truth now. Humanity had never intended to win a traditional war. They had designed a system where the enemy collapses first. "Order retreat," he said at last. The words tasted like poison. But even retreat was no longer simple. Human strike forces had already moved ahead of the fleeing fleets, cutting off escape routes, collapsing hyperspace corridors, turning the Sol system into a trap. The Empire had arrived believing Earth was prey. They now realized they had walked into a killing ground, and the timer had just begun. 14 minutes were still counting down. The first thing the Empire lost was control. Not territory, not ships, control. Inside the command chamber of the Imperial flagship, alarms layered over one another in chaotic harmony. Displays flickered between red and black. Tactical projections updated too fast to read. Entire squadrons vanishing before reports could finish uploading. Admiral HFY stood frozen, claws gripping the edge of the command platform. This was wrong. Wars were not supposed to feel like this. Imperial doctrine was flawless. Overwhelming force. Centralized command. Absolute obedience. Their enemies always broke first, either in fear or fire. But humanity wasn't breaking. Humanity wasn't even reacting. They were executing. Admiral, an officer stammered, Fleet Sigma is gone. XYRR didn't turn. Define gone. No debris field. No survivors. One moment they were retreating, next moment, nothing. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. The Empire had encountered ambushes before. They had lost fleets before. But fleets didn't simply disappear. Across the Sol system, Imperial formations unraveled. Orders issued from the flagship arrived seconds too late, or not at all. Autonomous commanders hesitated, waiting for confirmation that never came. Humanity exploited every second of hesitation. From beyond the orbit of Neptune, something massive shifted course. Imperial sensors detected it too late. "What is that object?" an officer demanded. Data flooded in. The object was enormous, larger than any human vessel previously observed. Its mass readings were inconsistent. Its energy output unstable. "It's an asteroid?" someone guessed. "No," another replied, voice shaking. "It's been hollowed out." The realization hit the bridge like a physical blow. Humanity had weaponized celestial bodies. The asteroid ignited engines buried deep within its core. Gravity wells formed around it, distorting space. Human warships rode within its shadow, invisible until the last possible moment. Then the asteroid split apart. From inside its shell, dozens of capital-class human war platforms emerged. Ancient, brutal constructs designed without elegance or intimidation. They were built for one purpose: to survive long enough to kill something bigger. These designs, an Imperial engineer whispered, they don't follow standard efficiency models. "No," another replied. "They follow survivability models." The human platforms didn't engage immediately. Instead, they moved directly into the densest cluster of Imperial ships, where any normal fleet would be annihilated. The Empire opened fire. Beams and plasma lanced out, tearing chunks from human hulls. Armor burned. Structures fractured. The platforms did not retreat. They detonated internal charges, releasing clouds of reflective debris that turned Imperial weapons into friendly fire hazards. Then they fired point blank. At that range, even Imperial shields failed. A dreadnought vanished in a flash of compressed matter. Two cruisers collided after losing maneuvering control. Shockwaves rippled outward, shattering nearby vessels like glass. The Empire was losing ships faster than they could understand how. And then, fear spread. Not fear of death, fear of patternlessness. Human attacks had no rhythm, no repetition, no predictable escalation. Every strike seemed improvised, yet perfectly timed. "Admiral," an officer said quietly, "human forces are not attempting to preserve their ships." XYRR turned sharply. "Explain." "They're pushing damaged vessels directly into combat. They're overloading reactors. They're sacrificing units to cripple ours." Another officer added, "They're treating ships as ammunition." The realization was horrifying. The Empire fought wars to conquer. Humanity fought wars to end them. Across the fleet, discipline began to crack. Junior commanders broke formation to protect their own ships. Others attempted unauthorized retreats. Some fired blindly into space, desperate to hit something. Anything. Humanity punished every mistake. Autonomous kill drones swarmed fleeing ships, targeting engines first. Boarding pods slammed into Imperial hulls, releasing human soldiers into corridors never designed for close combat. The Empire had no answer for that. Imperial soldiers were trained for formation warfare, energy weapons, range dominance. Humans fought with kinetic weapons. Blades, shock rounds, brutal efficiency. Survivors spoke of humans advancing through smoke and fire, wounded but relentless, dragging broken weapons if necessary. They did not shout. They did not celebrate. They moved like they had already accepted death and chosen to take everything with them. Back on the flagship, reports grew worse. Hyperspace corridors collapsing. Outer fleet refusing orders. Occupied systems are revolting. XYRR Val felt something he had not felt in centuries. Doubt. The Empire had underestimated more than human weapons. They had underestimated human psychology. Humanity was not unified by obedience. They were unified by memory. Memory of wars fought among themselves. Memory of near extinctions. Memory of survival bought at unbearable cost. And now, facing annihilation by an external enemy, humanity had done the unthinkable. It stopped holding back. At minute 8 of the engagement, the impossible happened. An Imperial Grand Carrier, one of the symbols of absolute dominance, attempted a hyperspace jump. Human interdiction fields snapped shut. The carrier emerged halfway through its jump. Space tore apart. The explosion was visible from Earth. Across the planet, billions of humans watched a burning shape fall apart in orbit. For a brief moment, fear turned into something else. Resolve. Earth's governments authorized the final escalation. Weapons humanity had never admitted to possessing went live. Gravity inversion lances fired from lunar platforms. Time-dilated kill zones snapped into place. Entire regions of space became lethal to anything with mass. The Empire's fleet was no longer fighting. It was dying. Admiral XYRR Val sank into his command throne. "This is not resistance," he murmured. "This is retribution." With trembling claws, he issued the order no Imperial admiral had ever spoken in recorded history. All forces disengage. Full retreat. The command echoed through broken channels. Some ships obeyed. Many could not. And some, terrified beyond reason, did not want to. Because by then, the truth had spread through the fleet. Earth was not the target. Earth was the warning. And humanity intended to make sure the galaxy never forgot it. As the timer reached 10 minutes, Imperial losses crossed a threshold that should have been impossible. More than half the invasion fleet was gone. The Empire still existed, but its illusion of invincibility had died, and humanity was not finished. At exactly 13 minutes and 40 seconds, the Galactic Empire ceased to function as an empire. Not officially, not ceremonially, but in every way that mattered. Across the shattered remains of the invasion fleet, something invisible spread faster than any human weapon. Certainty. The certainty that this war could not be won. Imperial command channels were no longer issuing strategies. They were issuing fragments, half-orders, contradictory commands, desperate attempts to impose structure on chaos. Fall back to rally point. No. Hold position. No. Scatter. The transmission cut off as the relay station vanished in a burst of silent light. Admiral XYRR Val no longer shouted. His voice had gone hollow, stripped of authority by the reality unfolding around him. He watched his empire die not in one great explosion, but in thousands of small, irreversible failures. The Empire had always believed collapse would come from rebellion, corruption, or decay. They never imagined it would come from 14 minutes of human decision-making. Imperial ships tried to flee. Humanity let some of them go. Not out of mercy, out of strategy. Those ships carried terror. Human command algorithms, built not just to fight, but to shape perception, calculated which vessels should survive. Ships with high-ranking officers. Ships broadcasting open channels. Ships already transmitting distress calls. Let them run. Let them tell the story. Within the Sol system, space itself had become hostile. Hyperspace corridors twisted unpredictably as human gravity manipulation fields surged and collapsed. Imperial navigators screamed as familiar routes betrayed them. Several ships attempted blind jumps. None succeeded. Some emerged inside planets. Others inside stars. Most never emerged at all. At minute 13 and 50 seconds, the Empire attempted its final escalation. Deep within the heart of the flagship, sealed behind layers of command authorization, an ancient protocol activated. Imperial Extermination Directive. If the fleet could not conquer Earth, it would destroy it. Planet-killer weapons, forbidden even by Imperial law, charged simultaneously across surviving dreadnoughts. These are not weapons of war. They were weapons of erasure. Their activation spiked energy readings across the system. Human sensors detected the buildup instantly. For the first time since the invasion began, human command hesitated. Because this was no longer about victory. It was about survival. On Earth, beneath oceans and mountains, humanity's final safeguard awakened. Not a fleet, not a weapon, a decision. Every human government, military branch, and autonomous defense system received the same confirmation code. Dead hand authorization granted. This was humanity's last line. A system designed so that even if Earth fell, the attacker would not survive the aftermath. Imperial planet killers fired. The beams never reached Earth. From beyond Pluto's orbit, something answered. A lattice of human-built structures, long dismissed as scientific installations, ignited simultaneously. They were not weapons in the traditional sense. They were space-time manipulators. The incoming beams bent, folded, redirected. One beam curved back into the firing dreadnought, carving it in half. Another sliced through 3 Imperial cruisers before dissipating into the void. The remaining beams scattered harmlessly into deep space. The Empire's last gamble had failed. At minute 13 and 55 seconds, Admiral XYRR understood the truth. Earth could not be destroyed. Earth could not be intimidated. Earth could not be conquered. And then, humanity spoke again. Not to the Empire, to the galaxy. Every surviving Imperial transmission relay, captured, hacked, or forcibly repurposed, broadcast a single human message outward at faster-than-light speeds. It carried no threat, no demand, only footage, unedited battle recordings. Imperial fleets collapsing, dreadnoughts dying, commanders screaming as systems failed, and a simple statement translated into thousands of languages. This is what happens when you bring war to our home. The effect was immediate. Across the galaxy, worlds went dark as governments cut transmissions. Councils dissolved mid-session. Military forces stood down, terrified of attracting attention. On occupied planets, enslaved species watched the impossible. The Empire bleeding, the Empire fleeing, the Empire failing. Rebellions ignited like sparks in dry grass. Back in Seoul, the final minute ticked down. Imperial formations no longer resembled a fleet. There were clusters of damaged ships, drifting, colliding, or desperately trying to escape the killing field. Human forces closed in, but not recklessly. Every strike was measured now, purposeful, ending resistance, not indulging in destruction. At minute 13 and 58 seconds, Admiral XYRR issued his final order. All remaining forces surrender. The words echoed through broken channels. Some ships powered down weapons. Some vented atmosphere in despair. Some self-destructed rather than face capture. Human command acknowledged the surrender. They did not celebrate. They executed containment. Boarding teams secured surviving vessels. Medical units treated wounded enemies. Prison protocols activated with cold efficiency. Humanity was done proving a point. At exactly 14 minutes, the battle ended. Not with cheers, not with victory speeches, with silence. The Sol system drifted beneath a sky littered with wreckage. Imperial metal cooling in the vacuum. Once proud symbols of dominance reduced to debris. Earth still stood, intact, untouched. Across human command centers, officers removed helmets. Some sat down, some stared at nothing. Some wept, not in joy, but in release. Humanity had crossed a line. There was no going back. They had revealed themselves to the galaxy not as victims, but as something far more dangerous. Back aboard the captured flagship, Admiral XYRR was escorted to a containment chamber. He did not resist. He no longer had the strength. As the door sealed, a human officer looked at him, not with hatred, but with something colder. Understanding. You should have left us alone, the officer said. XYRR Val lowered his gaze. The Empire still existed on paper, but its fleets were shattered, its authority broken, its myth destroyed. In 14 minutes, humanity had done what no civilization had ever done before. They had not just survived the Empire, they had ended it. And the galaxy knew now, Earth was no longer a world to conquer. It was a force to fear. The Sol system was quiet now. At least, the quiet of survival, not of peace. But across the galaxy, chaos had erupted. When the Empire's fleets fell in Sol, the signal didn't just die. It echoed through every star system it once ruled. And that echo carried a message far more potent than any weapon. The Empire could be defeated. For millennia, the Galactic Empire had ruled with absolute authority. Its core worlds, majestic planets with cities spanning continents, spaceports that held millions of soldiers, and orbital armadas larger than entire solar systems, were considered untouchable until humanity arrived. Within hours, transmissions from these worlds turned from compliance to confusion, then fear, then rebellion. Colonial governors who had been loyal for centuries were stunned. Entire populations watched, via hacked imperial channels, as their conquerors died without mercy or mercy's delay. The broadcasts from Sol were brutal in their simplicity. Fleet annihilated, command structure dissolved, Earth unbroken. They could no longer ignore the reality. The Empire's first core planet to react was Zyphora, a jewel of military engineering. Orbital defenses blinked erratically as human strike forces, remote, autonomous, and prepositioned in secrecy, activated. They didn't just attack ships. They attacked infrastructure. They attacked command centers. They attacked communications. Entire orbital arrays collapsed under precision strikes. Planetary shields, once considered invincible, failed catastrophically. Cities on the surface shook as subterranean human weapons systems detonated in controlled bursts designed to cripple, not necessarily destroy, but sufficient to break imperial control. Colonists and administrators fled to underground bunkers. Soldiers attempted to organize, but the Empire had trained them to follow orders, not think independently. With communications severed and reinforcements impossibly distant, panic spread faster than the heat of energy beams. Human forces were methodical. They didn't linger to celebrate destruction. They secured control points, neutralized key assets, and moved on. Their aim was clear: dominate the Empire without mercy, but without unnecessary destruction to civilians. Zyphora fell within minutes, not to overwhelming force, but to calculated terror and strategy. News of its fall spread like wildfire across neighboring systems. Once the first core world fell, loyalty began to erode. Colonial administrators, fearful of the same fate, abandoned posts. Soldiers stationed on outer worlds refused orders to move into conflict zones. Entire planetary systems sent messages to Sol, expressing a desire to negotiate directly with Earth, or simply asserting independence. Human forces did not intervene immediately. They let the signals pass, observed, and allowed fear to do its work. In some cases, populations rose spontaneously. On the industrial world of Traxxas, mining colonies armed themselves using weapons stockpiled for defense against pirates and civil unrest. For the first time in decades, ordinary citizens carried energy rifles and improvised explosives, not against humans, but against the Empire. Entire cities coordinated strikes against local military garrisons. When human fleets arrived, they encountered not just Imperial forces, but an entire planetary populace ready to fight. The synergy was terrifying. Human command guided the resistance, but the locals provided knowledge, terrain mastery, and an unyielding will to survive and avenge. Empire commanders called it chaos. Humanity called it strategy. The collapse of the core worlds accelerated when human forces targeted communication and logistics networks. Subspace relays, which once allowed instant coordination across hundreds of light years, were either destroyed or corrupted. Data packets traveling at the speed of light carried false orders, misleading Imperial captains into collisions, friendly fire, and orbital disasters. Admiral XYRVAL's messages were received hours late, or in some cases, never. Panic became systemic. The Empire had trained for disciplined retreat, but there was no longer discipline to maintain. Across every command center, the same pattern emerged. Fleet units disobeyed orders, planetary governors ignored decrees, and bureaucrats hid in fear. The Empire's bureaucracy, which had been their greatest strength, became their fatal flaw. Decision-making froze under uncertainty, while human forces exploited every hesitation. Within 24 hours of the Sol engagement, humanity moved deeper into Imperial territory. Draconis Prime, the central hub of the Empire's war machine, faced its first direct human assault. Orbital defenses opened fire, confident in centuries of dominance. But the humans had studied every weapon, every shield, every pattern. They didn't attack all at once. They attacked the weak points, the edges, the critical nodes that allowed the planet's defenses to function. Ships warped into orbit silently. Autonomous boarding parties struck without warning. Saboteurs, genetically engineered humans trained for infiltration, breached surface installations, commandeered weapons arrays, and neutralized planetary defenses from within. By the time Imperial leadership realized what was happening, the planet's orbital fleet had already been neutralized, and its cities were in chaos. Emergency lockdown protocols failed. Panic spread faster than any human action could be traced. Other command worlds followed. Vorin, Kelter, Xandria, all key military hubs, succumbed in the same pattern. Communications, logistics, morale, and fear all collapsed before actual combat, in some cases. Entire fleets surrendered without firing a shot. Human efficiency was clinical, precise, and devastating. The true genius of humanity's strategy lay in turning the Empire's own subjects into allies or obstacles. On Traxxas and Zyphora, civilians armed themselves alongside human forces. They acted as scouts, saboteurs, and boarding crews. Imperial soldiers were caught between external attacks and internal uprisings. Attempts to suppress civilian resistance failed because humans provided coordination, intelligence, and technical support remotely. Within hours, these freed populations became extensions of human military operations, multiplying strike capacity exponentially. Every world lost became a hub for rebellion against nearby systems. Neighboring colonies refused to send reinforcements. Supply lines were severed. Imperial morale collapsed further. By the second day, the Empire's leadership was in full-blown panic. Commanders were trapped on broken planets, fleets adrift in space, subordinates disobeying, and civilians rioting. Even the High Council, the supposed embodiment of stability, could not coordinate responses. Reports indicated that officers abandoned posts to save themselves. Propaganda failed. Messages of loyalty fell on deaf ears. Soldiers refused orders to fight humans, fearing annihilation. Entire sectors declared independence, forming autonomous states in rebellion. The Empire was no longer an organized force. It was fragmented, leaderless, and terrified. Humanity had achieved what generations of revolts, internal corruption, and uprisings never could. They destroyed the myth of invincibility. Across the galaxy, word spread faster than human ships could travel. Earth does not negotiate. Earth does not surrender. Earth strikes, and the Empire bleeds. Humanity's strategy had become psychological warfare on a galactic scale. In less than 48 hours, humanity had not only survived the Empire's invasion, it had neutralized core fleets, captured or destroyed command worlds, turned oppressed populations into allies, broken communications and logistics, and spread fear and rebellion faster than Imperial weapons could respond. By the end of this campaign, the Empire existed in name only. Its ships drifted like broken husks. Its planets either surrendered, rebelled, or were under observation by human forces. The galaxy understood one terrifying truth. Earth had not only defended itself, it had rewritten the rules of war. The galaxy trembled, but it did not yet understand why. News of the Empire's collapse spread faster than any light-speed transmission. Messages from Sol, captured and broadcast across subspace, showed fleets shredded before they could even organize, planets liberated before resistance could form, and entire command structures dismantled in minutes. For countless civilizations, it was impossible to comprehend. Patterns that had guided empires for millennia no longer applied. Humanity did not negotiate. Humanity did not hesitate. Humanity destroyed and liberated with the same breath. Outer Rim colonies paused mid-operations. Mining fleets froze. Trade routes halted. Soldiers stopped their patrols, staring at holoscreens in disbelief. The simulations, histories, and doctrines that had guided civilizations in war suddenly felt meaningless. Humanity had introduced a variable no one could calculate, a species that acted unpredictably, decisively, and with brutal intelligence. Panic spread through galactic governments. Leaders recalled fleets, shut down communications, and convened emergency councils. Every planet with Imperial allegiance evaluated contingencies, evacuation protocols, defense mobilization, alliances, and potential surrender. No plan accounted for a species that could dismantle the most disciplined fleet in the galaxy in minutes or neutralize entire planetary defense networks without leaving a trace of error. In the remnants of the Imperial Council, advisors whispered in panic. Humanity is not a threat to be negotiated with, one admitted, voice trembling. There's something else, something we cannot predict, cannot outmatch, cannot anticipate. Fleets in outer sectors scrambled aimlessly. Panic became systemic. Humanity was everywhere at once, striking in silence, broadcasting victories, and liberating worlds before fleets could even respond. Some leaders attempted diplomacy. Envoys were dispatched, offering tribute, loyalty, and strategic cooperation. But humanity's response was deliberate and measured. Loyalty was required, deceit was forbidden, and any attempted deception met with immediate neutralization. Planets that tried to hide or manipulate were disarmed, leaders detained, and militaries either integrated or disabled. Humanity's message was simple, direct, and terrifying. Survival demanded obedience, or irrelevance. Fleets that fled to uncharted regions carried stories that spread faster than light. Ships told of precise attacks, of defenses dismantled before they could react, and of civilian populations armed and trained to coordinate with human forces. Humanity was not just winning battles, it was reshaping the psyche of the galaxy. Entire civilizations recalculated the cost of defiance. If humans could destroy the Empire's fleets and topple their command worlds in mere hours, what could they do to anyone else who resisted? Galactic scholars and strategists attempted to understand the humans. Every recorded battle, every movement, every strategy was analyzed. The conclusion was unsettling. Humans combined technology, numbers, and hierarchy, but they did so fluidly, improvising when needed, calculating when necessary, and always prioritizing the annihilation of threats while minimizing unnecessary destruction. They were disciplined but unpredictable, ruthless but precise. Every action taught the galaxy a lesson it had never expected. No defense was permanent, no fleet invincible, no empire untouchable. Humanity understood that the war had been psychological long before it became physical. Every orbital strike, every boarding operation, every planetary liberation was broadcast with precision. Imperial forces, once symbols of terror, were exposed as vulnerable, disorganized, and mortal. Across countless star systems, enslaved and oppressed populations watched. In private, quietly, plans for rebellion began. If humanity could dismantle the mightiest empire the galaxy had known, what chance did their oppressors have? Every alien observer, every military commander, and every planetary council came to the same conclusion. Earth was not merely a planet to be feared. It was a force of nature. Fleets that once projected dominance now avoided Sol, routing ships to distant sectors while attempting to understand the threat they could no longer confront. The galaxy was in motion, not because of war, but because of fear, the fear of a species that acted outside all rules and expectations. Alliances shifted overnight. Worlds previously loyal to the Empire sought direct contact with humanity. Some offered resources, technology, or intelligence. Others simply surrendered their fleets and planetary defenses, hoping to avoid destruction. Humanity accepted some allies, but always on strict terms: loyalty, transparency, and willingness to act against threats without hesitation. Any attempt at duplicity resulted in immediate and permanent neutralization. Stories of entire planetary governments being disarmed, leaders detained, and militaries reprogrammed spread across the galaxy. Even the most remote colonies recalculated their future. Some fled to uncharted territories, attempting to hide from the perceived inevitability of human dominance. Others sought peaceful surrender, sending messages of compliance before human forces even arrived. Across every star system, it became clear resistance was no longer feasible. Survival required obedience, alignment, or retreat into irrelevance. In a span of days, humanity's influence expanded exponentially. Sol became the nexus of a silent but overwhelming sphere of control. Intelligence networks, previously secretive and fragmented, were centralized and monitored. Human strike forces appeared where they were needed, often before anyone could issue a warning. Liberation of occupied planets became a synchronized operation of military precision and psychological strategy. Any world observing these events understood that humanity did not merely destroy, it commanded fear, loyalty, and respect simultaneously. Alien civilizations attempted to counterbalance this new order. Fleets were regrouped, alliances forged, and weapons stockpiled. But every attempt to resist met with demonstrations of human capability, strikes executed with speed, intelligence, and ruthlessness that left no room for countermeasures. The psychological impact on every observer was profound. Generals who had faced countless wars began to question every principle of strategy they had learned. They realized that humanity had introduced a new paradigm in warfare, one in which destruction, liberation, and control were inseparable and instantaneous. At the same time, humanity's restraint became evident. Civilians on liberated worlds were protected. Infrastructure essential for recovery was preserved. Communications were restored, but only under guidance. Discipline and mercy were tools as precise as weapons. The galaxy understood a terrifying truth. Humans could destroy empires, but they could also reshape worlds without unnecessary devastation, creating a duality of fear and respect unparalleled in galactic history. The speed of human operations created a cascading effect. Every empire-controlled system in rebellion inspired nearby worlds to act. Fleets were immobilized, supply lines severed, and governance structures destabilized before any counterattack could materialize. Civilian uprisings, once rare, became common. In some cases, populations armed themselves independently while awaiting human guidance. By coordinating with humans, these uprisings became highly effective, targeting weak points and neutralizing imperial authority without risking widespread civilian casualties. As weeks passed, the galaxy's perception of humans transformed. They were no longer simply a defensive species. They were a dominant, decisive, and fearsome force capable of destroying and liberating simultaneously. Across communications, scholars, and military analysts, one term began to dominate conversation: the force of soul. A species that could not be predicted, could not be intimidated, and could not be stopped by conventional means. By the end of Section 6, the galaxy was united by one shared reality. Humanity had arrived, and everything had changed. No council could command confidence. No fleet could assert dominance. No empire could survive without fear. The once mighty Galactic Empire, fractured and humiliated, served as a warning. And from Sol, humans watched the galaxy tremble, calculating their next moves, ready to enforce the new order they had created, not through diplomacy alone, but through the demonstrated power of total war, precision strategy, and unyielding resolve. The remnants of the empire had nowhere left to hide. Once mighty fleets drifted in broken formations, entire planetary governments surrendered or dissolved, and subspace channels overflowed with reports of chaos and rebellion. Humanity did not move recklessly. They had learned centuries of warfare, both on their own planet and in space, and knew the value of precision, strategy, and control. As human strike teams secured orbiting vessels and liberated worlds, prisoners were brought under strict supervision. The captured Imperial officers, soldiers, and administrators faced a choice: comply, provide intelligence, and accept human authority, or vanish quietly into containment systems designed for long-term isolation. There was no public spectacle, no cruel punishment for punishment's sake. The humans operated with a purpose: ensure the empire could not rise again, while also demonstrating the precision and discipline of a species that had survived against impossible odds. Human boarding parties moved swiftly through Imperial ships. Soldiers who had once commanded entire fleets found themselves disarmed and under observation, their pride replaced by cold calculation. For the first time in millennia, the so-called invincible officers of the Empire realized that humanity did not act out of fear or ego. Humans acted with clarity, planning, and absolute finality. Every prisoner was treated according to the rules of containment and intelligence gathering, yet the message was unmistakable: resist again, and there would be no mercy. On liberated worlds, humanity established temporary administration centers, staffed not only by military personnel, but also by engineers, scientists, and strategists. They ensured that essential infrastructure was preserved. Power grids, communication arrays, and transportation networks were restored under human supervision, allowing civilians to resume daily life with minimal disruption. The message was clear: humanity conquers, but it does not destroy indiscriminately. This approach sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Alien populations who had been enslaved or oppressed for centuries began to realize that alignment with humans offered not just survival, but stability. Yet, humanity was not naive. Every liberated system became part of a larger network. Automated monitoring platforms, stealth observation drones, and quantum encrypted communication relays were established to ensure compliance. Any hint of rebellion or covert Imperial planning was detected immediately. No signal went untracked. No fleet movement escaped notice. Through these measures, humans created a network of control that was both subtle and absolute. Word of human methodology spread. Across the remaining Imperial territories, commanders hesitated to issue orders. Colonists and soldiers alike watched the fate of those captured and realized that defiance would lead to containment or destruction. Entire planetary administrations voluntarily submitted, sending envoys to Sol to negotiate terms under human oversight. Humanity responded with a mix of calculated diplomacy and strict enforcement. Compliance was rewarded with autonomy and protection. Deceit was met with rapid, final neutralization. The psychological impact on the galaxy was profound. Humans had demonstrated the ability not only to annihilate fleets and capture worlds, but also to control the aftermath in a way that left no ambiguity. Civilizations that had previously feared imperial rule now feared humanity even more. It was one thing to lose to an empire built over millennia. It was another to witness the destruction of that empire in mere hours by a species that had once been considered a minor power. Across occupied worlds, populations began to cooperate with human forces voluntarily. Scientists offered technological expertise, engineers provided logistical support, and civilians helped rebuild infrastructure. Human leaders coordinated these efforts with precision, turning liberated populations into active participants in stabilizing the galaxy. Every action reinforced the humans' reputation as both merciless warriors and meticulous administrators. Yet, there were those who refused to comply. Rebel officers, isolated imperial remnants, and rogue factions attempted guerrilla strikes, sabotage, and covert operations. Humanity neutralized these threats systematically. Advanced reconnaissance detected ambushes before they could occur. Strike forces engaged rogue units with overwhelming efficiency, and intelligence networks predicted insurgent movements in advance. No rebellion lasted long. The galaxy was learning quickly. Resistance against humanity was futile. As the containment and stabilization operations continued, humanity delivered a final, deliberate warning to all surviving Imperial forces and to the galaxy at large. Broadcasts were sent using captured Imperial relays, covering countless systems simultaneously. The message was simple, visual, and undeniable. Fleets shattered, command worlds fallen, prisoners contained, and rebellion quelled. The Empire's symbol of invincibility had been dismantled. Humanity did not threaten for political gain. They threatened as a species that would not tolerate threats to their survival or sovereignty. These broadcasts had the intended effect. Across multiple sectors, fleets powered down preemptively, governments reconsidered aggressive postures, and occupied populations stopped supporting Imperial remnants. Fear replaced loyalty. Doubt replaced obedience. And the galaxy collectively understood a new reality. Earth had risen as a dominant, unstoppable force. Despite their power, humans maintained discipline. They did not exploit fear to destroy unnecessarily. Systems and populations under human oversight were guided, educated, and protected, showing the galaxy that dominance could be wielded with strategy rather than wanton destruction. At the same time, they reinforced a principle that became known as the Soul Doctrine. Compliance ensured survival. Deception guaranteed eradication. By the end of the first galactic cycle under human observation, the balance of power had shifted irreversibly. Imperial remnants existed, but they were isolated, disorganized, and powerless to influence the galaxy. Freed worlds had begun to organize their own governments under human guidance, ensuring local autonomy while remaining aligned with Soul's strategic objectives. Rebel forces had been neutralized, insurgencies quelled, and the psychological dominance of humanity cemented. The galaxy had witnessed a species that combined precision warfare, psychological mastery, and meticulous administration. Humanity had rewritten the rules of engagement, demonstrating that victory was not just about fleets or weapons, but about control, perception, and the ability to act decisively in the moments that mattered most. As human leaders observed the galaxy from orbiting command platforms, the lesson was clear. Conquest achieved through brutality alone was temporary. True dominance required strategy, efficiency, and the will to enforce consequences without hesitation. Humanity had delivered that lesson with unparalleled clarity, ensuring that the galaxy would never underestimate them again. By the close of the operations, the remaining Imperial fleets and loyalists were nothing more than fragments, scattered and powerless. Every message transmitted to Soul reinforced the same idea. Humanity had arrived, unchallenged, and any attempt to oppose them would be met with inevitable, absolute response. The warning was clear, and it required no repetition. The galaxy had already learned its lesson. Humanity had not only survived a war meant to destroy them. They had turned the tables, dismantled the Empire, liberated worlds, and established a sphere of influence that combined fear, respect, and disciplined control. In doing so, they ensured that the story of the Soul System would echo across the stars for millennia. The planet that had once been underestimated had risen, and all others would bend or break before it. And as the final transmissions from liberated worlds reached Soul, human leaders did not celebrate. They prepared. They planned. They watched. The galaxy was no longer a place of unknown threats. It was a chessboard, and humanity was already several moves ahead. The galaxy had changed forever. What had once been an empire spanning thousands of worlds was now a series of fragmented systems, trembling at the very mention of Earth. Humanity's rise had been swift, merciless, and meticulously precise, leaving civilizations stunned, fleets broken, and leaders paralyzed by a combination of awe and terror. For centuries, The galaxy had known the Empire as invincible. Its fleets were unmatched, its technology superior, and its authority absolute. Yet in 14 minutes, in hours, in days, humanity had dismantled it piece by piece. Ships drifted in space, derelict and powerless. Command centers were silent. Core worlds, once considered untouchable, had either submitted, been liberated, or lay in ruins. The legend of the Empire had ended, not with a climactic battle, but with the cold, unstoppable efficiency of a species that refused to surrender. Every planet under observation felt the change. Leaders whispered of the force of soul, a species capable of rewriting history not through diplomacy, but through calculated, overwhelming force. Fleets that once patrolled systems with pride now lay docked, inactive or dismantled. Civilizations that had once feared the Empire more than death now feared humanity more. It was not just power, it was inevitability. Humanity did not celebrate. Victory, while complete, was only the beginning. Command centers across Sol coordinated the next phase, stabilizing liberated worlds, monitoring remaining Imperial remnants, and ensuring no faction could rebuild without oversight. Autonomous systems ensured real-time surveillance of strategic points, planetary defenses, and fleet movements. Every signal, every ship, every message was analyzed. Humanity had learned that dominance was not just about winning battles. It was about enforcing compliance without constant confrontation. The psychological impact on the galaxy was instantaneous and profound. Alien populations, once loyal to the Empire, began reorganizing under human guidance. Civilian uprisings became formal resistance movements, coordinated not to fight humans, but to stabilize their own systems while aligning with the new order. Humans did not destroy unnecessarily, but they did not tolerate hesitation. Every act of compliance was rewarded with autonomy and security. Every act of defiance was neutralized swiftly and irrevocably. Even the most distant civilizations understood the lesson. Messages from Sol did not carry threats, they carried reality. Humans had demonstrated that any attempt to challenge them, any thought of rebellion, any deception or concealment would be met with unstoppable precision. The galaxy internalized a truth it could not ignore. Earth was not a planet to be conquered, negotiated with, or underestimated. It was a force of nature. The remnants of the Empire were scattered and leaderless. Imperial governors hid in fear, fleets drifted without purpose, and bureaucracies dissolved. But humanity's oversight ensured that even in absence of direct conflict, no resurgence was possible. Prisoners, once powerful officers, were contained and observed, ensuring they could not rally forces elsewhere. Civilizations formerly under imperial rule began rebuilding, but always under the subtle control of Earth's intelligence networks. It was domination without tyranny, fear without wanton cruelty, an unprecedented balance of power. Humanity's fleets, now unchallenged, patrolled strategically important sectors, ready to respond instantly to any potential threat. Autonomous strike forces remained on alert, capable of executing complex operations without immediate human input, yet always in line with overarching strategy. The galaxy recognized that resistance was futile. Even speculation about challenging Earth's authority was dangerous. Humans had shown not just strength, but strategy, patience, and relentless efficiency. Across liberated planets, societies adapted rapidly. Humans provided assistance for infrastructure, education, and governance, turning fear into a stabilizing influence. Systems were free to govern themselves locally, but under human oversight, ensuring alignment with Sol's objectives. This combination of liberation and control cemented humanity's reputation as a species that could conquer, protect, and dominate simultaneously. Alien civilizations began to coordinate their own strategies, but all analysis pointed to a single conclusion. No known species could predict human action reliably. Simulations failed. Historical strategies were irrelevant. Every decision humans made combined experience, intuition, and ruthlessness with unparalleled efficiency. The galaxy understood that Earth had introduced a paradigm shift. The rules of war, diplomacy, and survival were no longer universal. They were defined by humanity. Even former imperial worlds sent envoys to Sol, offering resources, technology, and loyalty. Some sought protection, others guidance. Humanity's response was deliberate. Compliance was rewarded, deceit was punished. Entire fleets and planetary administrations were absorbed or dismantled. The lesson was clear. Obedience ensured survival. Betrayal guaranteed destruction. Every action reinforced the galaxy-wide understanding that Earth had risen as an unstoppable force. As weeks became months, the psychological dominance of humanity only grew. Alien fleets moved cautiously, trade networks rerouted to avoid Sol-controlled sectors, and councils convened in fear rather than authority. Even systems with advanced defenses understood they could not oppose humans without risking annihilation. The galaxy had internalized the truth. Resistance was meaningless, fear was mandatory, and alignment was survival. From orbiting command platforms above Sol, human leaders observed, calculated, and planned. They did not revel in fear. They enforced order. They understood that lasting dominance required vigilance, precision, and subtlety as much as strength. Humanity's rise was not an accident, nor a simple reaction to invasion. It was a demonstration of strategy, intelligence, and the uncompromising will to survive and assert control. The final transmissions from liberated worlds reached Sol continuously. Messages of cooperation, stability, and compliance. Every rebel or rogue faction had been neutralized. Fleets were reorganized, infrastructures rebuilt, and population stabilized. Humanity had ensured not just survival, but long-term supremacy. The galaxy had witnessed the birth of a new power. A species that had been underestimated, mocked, and threatened had become the universal standard of fear and respect. Earth did not merely survive the Empire. It had dismantled it, liberated worlds, controlled outcomes, and reshaped the rules of interstellar existence. And as the last transmissions settled into silence, human leaders did not pause. They prepared for the next challenge, knowing that the galaxy would test them again. But one truth was unshakable. The legend of Earth, the might of humanity, and the terror of the force of Sol had been established forever. The galaxy would never forget. The universe had learned its new master. Earth had risen, not with arrogance or cruelty, but with precision, strategy, and an unrelenting determination. The Empire was gone. The galaxy watched in fear. Humanity ruled, not by mere conquest, but by the demonstration that survival, vengeance, and total war could be wielded with intelligence and finality. In the aftermath, every world understood that the age of human dominance had begun. The galaxy would bend, adapt, or break, but humanity would remain. And those who doubted would remember the 14 minutes that shattered an empire, the relentless strikes that liberated core worlds, and the calm, calculated execution of absolute control. Humanity had arrived. The stars were theirs, not for tyranny, but for vigilance, for order, and for the unstoppable assertion of the species that refused to surrender.